Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, September 12th, 2025, and our friend Ambassador Chas Freeman is back with us. Welcome back, Ambassador.
Glad to be with you.
I want to start, Ambassador, with the case of Charlie Kirk, which was somehow shocking. And Donald Trump and his administration, Donald Trump himself came out and said that this is the far left attacking the people who are trying to communicate. But it seems that in his latest, in aftermath of recognizing who was that guy, identifying the guy who assassinated Charlie Kirk, he backed down in his latest interview on Fox News. He didn't mention the far left was responsible for that.
Well, I think we have a very polarized, very polarized society where people jump to conclusions. I don't recall any similar comments with the death of George Floyd. I mean, this was a very political reaction to somebody who was politically active. I don't remember when Nancy Pelosi was attacked by some guy with a hammer. I don't recall, or her husband was attacked. I don't recall any similar reaction from the left. But this is a typical right-wing reaction. It must be the left doing this. Well, we don't know what the ideology of the assassin was or what his motivations were. And it does seem that he wasn't on the far left, but we'll find out in due course. But anyway, the effort to politicize this was probably inevitable, and I think it's deplorable. And it is a measure of the extent to which tolerance no longer exists politically in the United States. We're very polarized, we're very violent.
Yeah. And somehow the case of Charlie Kirk shadowed what has happened outside of the United States. And
Well,
which
it's a
really,
convenient distraction from all sorts of other horrible things that are happening. But in the end, the most interesting thing, I think we should not leave this topic without noting that quite a number of people who made a comment of one sort or another that was interpreted as belittling or criticizing Charlie Kirk have lost their jobs. Again, I don't recall any of this happening after other murders, which we've had highly prominent ones. So we're in a moment of censorship, political censorship by corporate oligarchs, corporate oligopolies, by the administration. If you don't conform to the narrative, you are in trouble. If you don't produce results, statements that confirm the biases of Donald Trump, you're in trouble. If you head the Bureau of Labor Statistics and tell him things are not going splendidly, you get fired. If in the intelligence field, there's just been a letter from 300 diplomats saying that, people are afraid now to tell the truth. People are cautioned. You should not report anything that contradicts the prejudices of the president. This is exactly what happens in dictatorships. It's why they are fragile, because the dictator, the emperor is shielded from the observation that he has no clothes. And so he goes on behaving in a foolish manner, whereas he might have a chance of correcting his behavior if someone told him, look, things are not the way you think they are. But we can't do that anymore, apparently, under any circumstance.
Ambassador, when it comes to this argument of left and right, is there any? It's not just about the United States. Looking at Europe, here in Brazil is the same way. There is no left and right left the way that it was before. What's your understanding on that?
No, I think that's absolutely correct. There's great dissatisfaction, broadly speaking, in the society. Some people line up with one political tendency, others with another, but they're not divided by left and right. You can't explain things that way. Look at the Trump administration, which is instituting a sort of state capitalism, government ownership of the means of production. Intel, the latest one, apparently. But more generally, reaching into private companies and acquiring equity and a control position. What's that got to do with traditional right-wing thought? That is very, very socialist in its impact. Whether it's right or wrong is another question, but there's no question that left and right, in many ways, as you suggest, have either crossed each other or are not clearly distinguished. The Democratic Party, by the way, is utterly ineffectual at opposition to Trump. They have no platform. They're holding on to the vested interests that fund their elections. This is why you see no criticism still from the Democratic Party per se of the genocide in Gaza. And they're losing support. The last time I looked, I think they had only about 20% of adult Americans supporting them. So we don't have the traditional left-right dichotomy anymore, not in the United States, and I'd argue not in Europe either. I don't know about Brazil.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way here in Brazil. Ambassador, we had a very shocking attack from Israel on Qatar. Qatar is one of the most important allies of the United States in the Middle East. They have done everything to show their loyalty to the United States. They try to mediate many discussions. They try to somehow facilitate the communication between different parties. And you see Israel going and attacking Qatar when they were preparing these Hamas leaders with, they hit the negotiations room, and which they were supposed to negotiate, to talk with the other parties involved. And how can you understand that? Because we haven't seen this coming before. We haven't this sort of behavior and this sort of green light from the United States to Israelis to attack one of the main allies in the Middle East. What's your take on that? What do you make of it?
Well, I would not say that Qatar is an ally. It has no obligations to the United States. The United States has implied obligations to Qatar, certainly because Al Udeid Air Base, with its 11,000 airmen and women, is the major installation for the United States Air Force and the U.S. Central Command in the Persian Gulf. But I would say that Qatar has been a very clever, non-aligned or multi-aligned small country. It's caught between two major powers in the Gulf. One is Iran, with which it shares a gas field in the Persian Gulf. The other is Saudi Arabia, which has a history of intervention. In fact, the Al Thani family, who are the ruling family in Qatar, were originally put in power by Saudi intervention. They are descendants of people from the northern part of Saudi Arabia. And in fact, the emir is a direct descendant of Muhammad Abdul Wahab, the person who is maligned for inventing Wahhabism as a strict Sunni profession of religion. So they are very careful. They maintain strong relations, not just with the United States, but with Turkey, with India, with China, with Russia, and with Iran, and now with Saudi Arabia. So they are essentially, they have been made themselves useful to everybody in one way or another. That has just ended. They now have to recalibrate their entire strategy for survival. Obviously, their expectation that the United States would protect them not only from Iran, but from Israel or from Saudi Arabia is now highly questionable. In the June war, 12-day war, so-called, between Iran and Israel, after Israel attacked Iran, Iran retaliated to the American attack by firing at Qatar, at that same Al-Udeid air base. That illustrated the fact that that air base is a target, not necessarily a protection. They had every reason to believe that in convening a Hamas delegation to discuss what I think, frankly, was a totally insincere Israeli-dictated peace proposal put forward by the United States, that Israel would let that discussion go forward. Instead, for the second time in recent history, Israel treated the convening of the negotiations as a gathering of people that it could murder. That was how the attack on Iran began, with using negotiations in Muscat as cover for a surprise attack. Same thing this time in Qatar. What is clear, I think, is that this was not only an attack on Qatar, and in Israel's own words, it was a statement to the entire region that Israel will not respect any sovereignty other than its own, and will feel free to attack wherever it wishes. The Egyptians, for example, have just uncovered an apparent Israeli effort to assassinate Hamas officials residing in Cairo. No country now can negotiate with Israel and expect anything but to be paid in not with an agreement or reasonable discussion, but with an attempted invasion of sovereignty and murder on the part of the Israelis. The United States has lost great credibility. That base, well, first of all, Al-Udeid is in an interesting location. That was land originally disputed between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The Qataris are not stupid. They got the United States into an air base there, and thus the Saudis had to back off on their claim. But be that as it may, that base was seen by Qatar as an insurance policy against Iran, against Saudi Arabia, and against the UAE, with which the United States also has close ties, but with which anyway, there's been bad blood between the UAE, between the Al Nahyan family and the Al Thani for centuries. It's nothing new. When Saudi Arabia and the UAE blockaded Qatar for a time, that was at the instance of the UAE rather than Saudi Arabia, although the Saudis also were happy to join in. But what Israel just did is unite everybody in the Gulf. Every leader in the Gulf went to Doha to express solidarity with the Emir of Qatar and his government. The Emir and his government declared that any response had to be collective, everyone in the Gulf, even the Bahrainis and the Emiratis, who have not had good relations with Qatar, agreed. Kuwait, which is odd man out often in the Gulf Cooperation Council, also joined. And I think there are two other factors here that we haven't yet seen fully expressed, because we don't know what the full result of the Qatari re-examination of relations with the United States will be. We do know that there will be no more negotiations about hostages undertaken by Qatar. And that means, in effect, those hostages are never coming back alive. And the hostage families are well aware of that. There will be no discussion of peace. between Israel and the Palestinians, because Israel is in the process of either mass murder or mass removal of the Palestinians from all of Palestine. Gaza first, the West Bank second. There's just been a huge roundup of people in the West Bank, abduction basically, of people who will be displaced permanently from their homes. The settlement enterprise is in going forward full steam. That in turn, and the attack on Qatar, have led the UAE to say that what Israel is doing is a red line, and to put the Abraham Accords in obvious jeopardy. So the whole region is being transformed. Unsaid are two things. First, that this will accelerate the rapprochement between the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, the Arabs in the Gulf, and Iran, because they face a common threat from Israel. And Israel is, of course, openly planning to renew warfare against Iran. It's just carried out an act of war against the GCC. Second, if the American protection is not valuable, if giving Donald Trump a $400 million Boeing 747 signing a contract for $42 billion worth of American weaponry and maintaining an American presence at Al Udeid, which is a Qatari air base, not an American air base, although we use it. If these things are not enough to ensure protection from the United States, then Qatar must recalibrate. And it will, I think, look to China, because the Chinese are fierce defenders of sovereignty, and they have the air defense equipment that could displace what the Qataris had planned to buy from the United States. I believe there may also be restrictions put at a minimum on American use of that air base. And I think I would just end by saying that the incompetence and ineffectiveness of American diplomacy has seldom been better illustrated by Donald Trump's personal assurance to the Emir of Qatar that Israel would not attack Qatar again, followed immediately by Israeli statements that they intended to do just that. They will attack again, and they will attack anywhere in their region where they can reach what people that they consider to be their enemies. So this is indeed a major event, and it is a turning point. And of course, as is normally the case, we don't know the precise results that this will have. It will take some time to see those, but it's very clear that American credibility in the Gulf has been deeply, deeply discounted.
I think for the countries in the West Asia, in the Middle East, when they look at both countries, two countries that were attacked by Israelis, one, Iran, they attacked Iran before this war happening. They attacked Iran to kill Ismail Haniyeh.
Yes.
And they killed Ismail Haniyeh in Iran, assassinated him. And the same reason.
While he was a state guest at the inauguration of the state president.
Exactly. And they're doing the same to Qatar. It shows that in the eyes of Israelis, there is no difference between Iran, despite having this sort of argument that our regional allies are against Iran and all of that. But after all, when it comes to their calculation, their mindset, there is no difference between Iran and Qatar.
Well, I think the basic point is Israel has become a criminal state. It has no respect for the law or the norms of international relations. It does not respect the sovereignty of any other country. It crosses the border of Lebanon, bombs and strafes, invades on the ground. It does the same thing in Syria. It conducts assassinations. Let's remember that Khalid Mishal, who was one of the Hamas leaders that Israel just tried to murder, apparently unsuccessfully, was originally the focus of a Netanyahu-ordered assassination attempt in Jordan. 2 Israeli tourists injected a poison in his ear and then tried to take refuge in the newly established Israeli embassy in Amman. King Hussein was so annoyed by this that he told Netanyahu, if you don't provide the antidote to the poison and save Khalid Mishal's life and apologize, I will sever my relations with you. Jordan had just pretty much normalized relations. So this is another assassination attempt. Trump doesn't seem to have any trouble with any problem with this. It's very notable that while he condemned the attack, he said you didn't consult with the United States, which is probably incorrect. I think it's a lie. Maybe they didn't consult with him personally, but he didn't object to the assassination attempt. He thinks it's fine to kill Hamas. I don't think he has any idea at all of the history of the Middle East, the Palestinians, why Hamas won elections, what Hamas represents. It's just been successfully demonized by the Israelis. And I think, unfortunately, I have to say, I was just looking at other major relations of the United States, specifically the relationship with China, which is something I've been concerned about professionally for a long time. And here, it's amazing to me. There are China hawks, so-called, people who are looked to for guidance on tough policies toward China. The president, he never visited China until his first term in office when he went as the president. There's no evidence that he had any prior relationship with China at all. His principal trade advisor, Peter Navarro, made his career on writing about China, but he had never visited China until May of 2018, when he went with an official delegation. Marco Rubio, described as a prominent China hawk, has never been to China. Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, has never been to China. Elbridge Colby lived for a time in Hong Kong, which is not China. He did visit Beijing at least once, but all of these people know everything they need to know about China in their own view, and yet they know absolutely nothing. And I would dare say the same thing is really true of their views of the Middle East. They know absolutely nothing. What they know is what their Israeli paymasters tell them to know. And I say that with some pain because it's very obvious that the American policy toward West Asia has been entirely outsourced to Israel, and that Trump is Netanyahu's puppet.
He said, he called the Qataris, he said that he's not going to let Israel attack Qatar again. But when we look at what Netanyahu said, here is what Netanyahu said, Ambassador.
They should applaud Israel for standing up to these same principles and carrying them out. And I say to Qatar and all nations who harbor terrorists, you either expel them or you bring them to justice. Because if you don't, we will.
Yeah.
So there's a very interesting thing to be said about that. The words that have precise meanings, if they're overused, become insults and lose their meaning. What is a terrorist? A terrorist is anyone who does not support Israel. You're a terrorist, I'm a terrorist. Everybody in the world is a terrorist because we don't support Israeli policy. We may wish the Israelis themselves well. We may hope that Israel repents of its bad behavior and finds a secure place in the Middle East. But that's not enough. We have to support Israeli policies of genocide, of mass murder, of eviction, of ethnic cleansing, of assassination, and if we don't, we are aligned with terrorists. Whether people use the original definition of terrorist has never been entirely clear. A terrorist is someone who has a grudge and no air force, and so he has to use some other invented means to express his anger at being oppressed. So we have terrorist is someone who uses violence for political effect, which is exactly the basis of Israeli policy. State terrorism is Israeli policy, and you just heard it. There are other words that have lost their meaning. Anti-Semitic. What that used to mean someone who hated Jews. What it means now is someone that Jews hate and want to smear. So we have gotten into a world in which black is white, up is down, and 2 + 2 = a banana. It makes no sense at all.
Yeah. Do you, in your opinion, with the case of Hamas, it seems that after all, Donald Trump knows that Israel is not interested in negotiations because they assassinated, as I said before, Ismail Haniyeh in Iran. Because that's the only reason that you want to assassinate someone like him is a political leader of Hamas. He's not military. He wasn't connected to the military sector of Hezbollah or sector of Hamas.
He was actually moderate within the Hamas resistance coalition. He was also the chief negotiator. So we have a constant pattern here. Anyone who negotiates with Israel is likely to be killed. What does that tell you? That tells you that Israel sees negotiations as cover for military and intelligence operations, not as a means to reach an agreement. Israel does not want an agreement with the Palestinians. It wants them gone. To do that, it is apparently willing to commit murder anywhere in the world.
Are you going to be surprised if tomorrow you wake up and see Israel is attacking Turkey, is attacking Saudi Arabia? Is there any kind of surprise for you?
Well, they have actually just bombed the Turks in Syria. The Turks were setting up a base to train the new Syrian ex-jihadi government of Ahmed al-Shara, and that base was bombed. Turks were bombed by the Israelis. So I guess the correct answer at my age is, if I wake up in the morning, I'm always surprised. But, whether something's happening or not. I would say the Israelis are full of surprises. They're very clever people. From an operational point of view, they're quite brilliant. I mean, the attack on Iran was a masterpiece of deception and military operations. It was also a political disaster and a strategic disaster for Israel. But Israel never seems to consider that. What they just did in Doha basically potentially destroys the Abraham Accords, unites everybody in the region against them, costs them the support of Europe. I notice even von der Leyen has now severed payments to the Israeli state. We have a vote in the European Parliament recommending that Europeans recognize a Palestinian state. All of this is predictable reaction to an utterly unreasonable, illegal murder attempt. Now, some people were murdered, among them a Qatari policeman and the son of one of the Politburo members in Hamas. But no, the press in the West deals with this in a disgraceful manner. Their question is, did they get him or not? Did they get the target or not? It's not Did they have any right to do this? Should there be no consequences for doing this? And a final point, Nima, because I'm not sure that at this point we're fully able to predict what the fallout will be. But the UN General Assembly just convened. And that was always going to be full of moves against Israel. I think there's a possibility that the General Assembly will follow the precedent of its suspension of South African membership over apartheid. It may even adopt a Uniting for Peace resolution, which would override the veto power of the United States in the Security Council and impose penalties of some sort on Israel. Unfortunately, in my view, the only way that Israeli genocide can be halted is with military intervention against it. And I just don't see that happening.
I think there was a voting today on the state of Palestine, the recognition of the state of Palestine. We had 142 in favor and 2 abstention and 10 against, 10 countries against. In these countries are Israel, Hungary, Argentina, and some other countries that are so much small and together with the United States.
I hadn't seen that vote, but I'm not at all surprised. I think the United States is totally isolated on this issue. Hungary may have affinities with Israel because the Hungarian government is pretty far to the right. And Hungary also likes to keep itself close to Donald Trump. That is, Viktor Orban and Donald Trump have a thing going. So I shouldn't be surprised about that. And then there are little Pacific islands that are basically under the control of the United States and which always vote with Israel. But 142, only 2 abstentions, 10 against. The world is against Israel. And Israel's done this to itself. This never would have happened if Israel had done what a normal country would do, which is establish borders. They have no borders. They continually expand. Now they're expanding into Syria. They're demanding territory in Lebanon. They are evicting everybody from Palestine, Gaza, and the West Bank. Nobody is safe from them. So it's surprising that even 10 votes could be achieved without this. I guess American diplomacy is more effective than I thought.
Yeah, Donald Trump is achieving quite something. Not only Ambassador, do you look at you mentioned China, and I think everybody's somehow connected to China and what's going on, because China's attitude toward the world is totally different from what we're witnessing from the United States. And look at the way that Russia is so much close to China. India is getting closer to China. How do you see the West Asia and the policies? Because the Trump administration shows because they don't give any sort of confidence to these Arab states that somehow they invested a lot in the security that they're getting from the United States. And after all, Israel can attack them. And they said they're going to attack them again. How is that going to change the Arab states, the leaders of Arab states' mindset toward China and some sort of new security or agreement, if that would come to their mind?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, there have been 3 factors that enabled the Arab states to remain close to the United States despite their fundamental disagreement with the United States about Palestine. The first has been the theory that because the United States was a peacemaker, an immediate intermediary between Israel and the Palestinians, and therefore trying to protect the Palestinians, that it would also protect them from Israel, that the United States had enough influence over the government in Israel to restrain it from outrageous provocations. That's gone. Nobody believes that Israel pays any attention to what the United States says under any president, Biden, Trump, it doesn't matter. The second reason has been that the United States has been the major source of modern, effective military technology. But we had no real competitors for quite a long time, even after the Cold War. During the Cold War, of course, the Arab states in the Gulf were aligned against the Soviet Union, and so that wasn't an option. After the Cold War, the Soviet Union was replaced by the Russian Federation, but for a long time, the Russian Federation did not have effective military technology or installations or industrial capacity. That's changed. The Russians now produce weapons that have been proven on the battlefields of Ukraine and that are clearly very much effective. The Chinese have emerged, as we saw on the September 3rd parade in Beijing. They have emerged as an alternative source of technology. You hear disparaging comments by people who really don't know what they're talking about, saying that the Chinese equipment, Chinese construction capabilities, so forth, are not up to Western standards. This is not the case. And I think one of the options before Qatar is, as I indicated, would be to replace some or all of the equipment they had originally thought to get from the United States with Chinese or Russian equipment. The Russians have limited manufacturing capability because they're focused on the war in Ukraine. There are no such constraints on China. It can ramp up production quickly. The third factor, pardon me, I've got a really bad itch on my nose, which is annoying to me and must be annoying to everyone watching, but can't do anything about it. Anyway, probably an allergy of some sort. Anyway, the third factor sustaining the relationship between the United States and the Gulf Arabs has been the American commitment to deploy troops and equipment in their defense. This was exactly what happened in the 1990-91 Gulf War to liberate Kuwait. When I was there as ambassador to Saudi Arabia, we made good on our commitment. We are able to project power. There is no other country in the world that can do that. So there is no alternative to the United States in terms of direct deployment of forces to protect the Gulf Arab states. But protect them against whom? In the past, they were worried about Iran because revolutionary Iran was trying to export its ideology of wilayat al-faqih, and it was sponsoring various Shiite movements of one sort or another that were antagonistic to Israel, but also to Sunni Islam and to the Saudis. So the concern was about Iran. And of course, the Abraham Accords were built in part on this concern because that was a concern that the Israelis also had. So this brought the Gulf Arabs and Israel closer. That's gone. Iran and the Gulf Arabs now have a common enemy, which is Israel. And the United States is an ally of Israel. And the slogan or the saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, is also reversible. My friend's enemy is maybe my enemy too. So I think that's gone. And lastly, there was an effort made by the UAE, Bahrain, among the GCC to normalize relations with Israel on the understanding that Israel would stop the settlement process and respect Palestinian rights to some degree. That the genocide and the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank have removed that. And the United States has demonstrated again and again that we will not come to the aid of the Gulf Arabs against Israel, or even against Iran, or against the Houthis. When the Abqaiq oil facilities in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia were struck, Donald Trump in his first term said, "Oh, well, that's a Saudi problem." When ships have been captured by the IRGC Navy, or there have been drones shot down in the Strait of Hormuz, there's been no reaction from the United States. Well, once again, in the case of the attack on Qatar, actual bombing attack, and the murder of a Qatari as well as state guests in Qatar, the reaction of Donald Trump is a shrug and nothing firm. So what is the value of the third factor, American protection, the American ability to project power? So I think one of the things that must be under discussion in the GCC is what combination of relationships could they devise to do two things. One, become more credible in their own defense collectively, and they have never been effective collectively because they tend to procure weapons, frankly, as much for the kickbacks and the rake-off from the contracts for those in power as for military purposes. And none of them want to give up the ability to take financial advantage of arms purchases. These are all family businesses as well as kingdoms. So that's a problem. But they now have an incentive to come together in a way that they never did. Second, they need to find international relationships that can substitute, at least in part, for the United States. Well, as I said, there are now other countries that produce first-class weaponry. There is a problem integrating them with American weaponry. That's true. The United States uses that as an argument for they're not acquiring non-American weapons. But at this point, I think that the United States may be on the verge of losing some or all of the arms market in the Persian Gulf. And, all of these countries, even the smaller ones, would like to have their own military industries. There is an agreement dating back to the dawn of time between Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Pakistan, an military-industrial cooperation agreement. I would imagine that the Gulf Arabs are now looking to reactivate that. The Egyptians are very inefficient, and they have a very corrupt government, but they do have military industry. Pakistan also has military industry, including some quite sophisticated military industry, and it has a very close relationship with China in terms of inputs of technology. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a renewed effort to create self-sufficient military industries in the Gulf. One other observation. Qatar has close relations with Turkey. The other countries in the Gulf really don't. But Turkey is also a major military industrial power. It produces all kinds of effective weaponry. And I would imagine that the Turks will be looked at very closely by people in the Gulf for what they might do in terms of investment in local production facilities. So the implications of all this are enormous. And we don't know. No, frankly, I have to say that the Gulf Arabs do not have a reputation for speedy and courageous decision-making. So will they be resolute? Will they rise to the occasion? Or will they try to somehow buy it off with more money and more sycophancy directed at Mr. Trump and others. But I don't see how the Middle East that we knew, in which Israel and the others were achieving a measure of rapprochement, is gone.
I think many of us, I'm talking about the younger generations, don't have any idea about the former presidents of the United States. I'm talking about George H.W. Bush, even Reagan, coming to Carter, Jimmy Carter. They were somehow putting pressure on Israel. They were just, Israel was not getting each and every permission that they were asking for during these presidents.
Well,
But
there is an unknown history here. In 1956, Israel, with Britain and France, attempted to conquer the Suez Canal and take it out from Egyptian management. President Eisenhower reacted very forcefully. He threatened the British and French and the Israelis in such a way that they had to withdraw. And what is less known is that the United States had an arms embargo on Israel. We would not sell any weapon to Israel. This is why the early Israeli weaponry was either from the Soviet bloc, it was from Soviet Union or Czechoslovakia, or it was from France. It was not from the United States. In 1964, after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, his vice president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, ran for president. He was very uncertain. He felt diminished. He was very uncertain about his prospects in that election. His opponent was Goldwater, who was of Jewish heritage, although himself a Christian. And he feared that Jewish money would defeat him. He had a clandestine meeting on Long Island in New York with 12 of the most important Jewish movers and shakers. And they struck a bargain. He would drop the arms embargo on Israel in return for their financial support for his campaign and the support of the Jewish community, such as it was then. Jewish community is the wrong word. The Jewish communities, because there are many and they don't agree with each other. They would try to lead Jewish support, financial and otherwise, for Johnson. As it happened, he roundly defeated Goldwater. So in 1967, when Israel launched a surprise attack on Egypt and Syria and successfully destroyed much of the Egyptian Air Force and the Syrian Air Force, the United States had supplied weapons to Israel and backed Israel. And we did that notwithstanding the fact that Israel sank an American eavesdropping or intelligence ship, the USS Liberty, and killed quite a number of sailors. And they did this, and Lyndon Johnson and his defense secretary, for entirely political reasons, covered this up. Much of the truth is now coming out. For a long time, the crew on that ship were under instructions from the US military not to say anything. But they're now old and retired, and they are speaking out. And so this history is coming out. Anyway, that was 1967. In 1973, the Egyptians counterattacked across the Suez Canal in an effort to retake Sinai from Israel, which had occupied it. In 1967, they were successful in at least showing Israel that it had to negotiate. The United States under Richard Nixon provided a massive airlift of weaponry to Israel. That led to the Arab oil embargo of 1973. And that led to the transformation of the relationships between the United States and Saudi Arabia. After the oil embargo, the Saudis were drowning in dollars, and Henry Kissinger and the then Secretary of the Treasury, Bill Simon, made a deal with the Saudis that they would take the dollars they got from the increased oil prices and reinvest them in the United States. They would invest them in treasuries and keep fund the American government deficit. And we've gone on from there. And what began as a political deal in Long Island to arm Israel has become an ironclad guarantee of what is called the qualitative edge, meaning that the United States will outdo anyone else in supplying technology to Israel so that it can overpower its neighbors and so forth. That's how we got where we are. There is a history here. The United States was not always supine and subservient to Israel. We had an America First foreign policy. We now have an Israel First foreign policy under Trump. That has aroused huge indignation among many people on the left and the right in the United States. Even Charlie Kirk was beginning to talk against this subservience to Israel. And in fact, the usual conspiracy theories, there are people out there suggesting that the Israelis were behind his murder. I don't believe that for a minute. But the fact is that public opinion is very much against the stance of the Trump administration. Even Mr. Trump's own followers are against it. And we've had discussions before on this subject, and I know that Larry Wilkerson and others on your show have talked about it at length. But I give you all this background because it is, as you said, forgotten. And the assumption is that the United States has always backed Israel. No, that's not so. And when we did decide to back it, it was not for strategic reasons. It was for domestic political reasons. And if we are still backing it, it is because of the willingness of a portion of the Zionist, pro-Zionist Jewish communities in the United States, some of them billionaires, plutocrats, to corrupt our government by giving money to candidates in return for their fealty to Israel.
Ambassador, we had Russian drones. They were talking about Russian drones over invading the airspace of Poland, and it seems that it was somehow, I don't know, it was a mistake on the part of Russia. It was a false flag operation in order to escalate the situation. What's your take on that?
I don't think it was a false flag operation. I don't think it was deliberate. I think Donald Trump is probably right that it was more likely an accident. He's being criticized for that from the Europeans. I think the Poles are nobody to mess with. They have a very formidable military. They're very capable. They've reacted with 4,000 troops deploying toward the Russian border, and they were able to shoot down 4 of the, I think, 19 errant drones. So the reactions to this are, however, predictable. The Ukrainians say the Russians did it deliberately. The coalition of the deluded that I've referred to elsewhere, Europeans have formed a coalition of the deluded to oppose Russia. They immediately become hysterical. You see, this proves Russia intends to conquer Paris. And they are using this to rally support for the continued war in Ukraine. The Russians predictably say, well, we didn't intend this. I don't know whether to believe them or not. I suspect they're right. Some Poles say, well, this was probably a Ukrainian false flag operation. I don't know. I think when wars go on, there's always some sort of spillover. And the drones, I think the most plausible theory, frankly, is that electronic warfare against the drones destroyed the effectiveness of their guidance systems and took them off course. There's a great deal of electronic warfare emanating from NATO forces and Ukraine to destroy the effective aiming, targeting of drones. And that could easily explain what just happened. But I have no idea what really happened. And I would say the chances are very good that, as in the case of the Nord Stream 2 sabotage, there will be multiple stories and we won't be able to tell which is true.
Yeah, because the reaction on the part of European was somehow exaggerated. They're sending these French fighter jets capable of carrying nuclear weapons to the Black Sea. And what was that all about? Because of the drones in the East?
This is the coalition of the deluded responding in a hysterical manner. This is all performative. There's nothing serious about it. The French don't want war with Russia. They just had an election which repudiated the Macron program of heavy defense rearmament and higher taxes and cuts in welfare and so forth. The Germans are in a similar position. They have said they're not going to send troops to Ukraine. Their government is very unpopular because of its rearmament and austerity programs. The Netherlands did send F-16 fighters to Poland to help down these drones. That shows that NATO is worth something. Poland is right to stay in NATO, but the Poles are the last people to exaggerate what NATO can do for Poland. And that is why they are spending over 4% of GDP on defense. And that is why they have developed a very strong military supply relationship with the Republic of Korea, South Korea. A lot of their equipment now, aircraft, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and so forth, come from the Koreans.
Before wrapping up, Ambassador, I want to play a clip of the Secretary of Commerce of the United States, Lutnick. He's talking about India. I think to wrap it up, it's good to hear him before wrapping up.
Doesn't yet want to open their market, stop buying Russian oil, right? And stop being a part of BRICS, right? They're the vowel between Russia and China. If that's who you want to be, go be it. But either support the dollar, support the United States of America, support your biggest client, who is the American consumer, or I guess you're going to pay a 50% tariff, and let's see how long this lasts.
Yeah, we're laughing, but it's tragic, by the way, to hear what he's talking.
I think it underscores a bit of sound advice that the Indians should take under their wing, and that is, you should never attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity, and that is pure stupidity. It's also protection racket talk. Yeah, nice country you have here with a big market in the United States, consumers. It would be a shame if something happened to that. But by the way, we're going to put 50% tariffs on you, and you're going to lose that market anyway. And take it or leave it, you know. This is just no way to deal with the world. And it has successfully alienated the entire world. I mean, obviously, the United States and Israel can still muster a total of 10 votes in the UN General Assembly, but that's all. Nobody has any desire people deal with Donald Trump the way that you deal with your somebody who is a psychotic. You don't want to be near him. You don't know what he'll do. It reminds me, I used to deal with a forgotten name, Jonas Savimbi in Angola. He was the head of UNITA. in rebellion against the Cuban-supported government in Luanda. And he had cerebral malaria, which meant he was crazy. He sometimes, when people went in to see him, they would not come out because he'd killed them. And he was a genius. He was a brilliant man. He read 4 hours a day in Portuguese, Spanish, German, French. Of course, they don't have a written Lingala. He spoke that. Kimbundu. Afrikaans. He hated the Afrikaners, but he worked with them. And so I knew when I went to see him that I was, putting my life on the line. So I would always carry a tin trunk of books with me and give it to him. And that was enough so that I'm still here. I didn't get murdered in his office. And people are dealing with Trump a little bit like that. Let's give him a 747. Maybe he won't kill us. This is no way to conduct a relationship. Anyway, Nima, thank you for all the good work you do.
I think Tim Cook, he has learned how to talk with Donald Trump. He went there and gave him some beautiful gold and pieces.
Well, yeah. Turns out that a lot of the gold in the Oval Office is from Home Depot, plastic mold that's been spray painted. But anyway.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Great pleasure as always.
Well, you have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too.